Releasing in Australian cinemas in June is a documentary called The Koalas. And it's my great pleasure to be speaking to Georgia Wallace-Crabbe, who directed the film together with Gregory Miller. Georgia, welcome to Movie Metropolis.
Thank you so much, Peter. Great to be here.
This is such an intriguing story about the loss of habitat and so on and the impact on koalas. How did the documentary first come about?
Well, you may or may not know, but some viewers might remember our previous film, which I was a producer on, but Gregory was the director, called Cultivating Murder,
Ah,
which was a true crime documentary. And we had been looking, I guess, we have a production company together, Gregory and I, and have been producing, for 20 or 30 years. And previously looking at market-driven films, but increasingly moving towards ethically concerned social justice and more lately environmental films. And quite clearly we're in an environmental crisis and an existential one. And we were looking at the time we made Cultivating Murder for a story that would express the issue of habitat loss on the scale that it was occurring in Australia. And we found the story of the murder of an environment officer in Moree in 2014 very compelling, and jumped onto that story the minute we heard about the murder, and it took a couple of years to make, but we were inside the legal case. Greg went to court every day and knew all the players in that murder trial. So that film was about the murder of an environment protection officer by a disgruntled farmer for clearing habitat. And that drew attention to the plight of koalas in Western New South Wales. So in 2014-15, we started following the plight of koalas in New South Wales. And we spoke to a lot of players in that space. And certainly when we had screenings and we rolled the film out as an impact release across the state with over 80 screenings, we met a lot of people on the ground who were dealing with the environment issues and habitat loss issues, and the distress of koala carers and animal carers dealing with the animals that are getting pushed to the edge and are now listed as critically endangered was becoming more urgent. Then the fires happened in 2019-20, and we watched, helpless as the world did, as we incinerated, 3 billion animals. So we were sort of, again, sitting around in COVID thinking, what can we do with this story? We're not in the fireground. There are news crews in firegrounds, whatever. And during COVID, everything quieted down and we had koalas turning up in the district in southern Sydney where we live. And people kind of going, oh, koalas, they were never here. And oh, koalas, they're okay. And oh, koalas, they're everywhere. And oh, koalas, they're nowhere. And no one seemed to know where koalas were, where they had been. People didn't know that they were in trouble. People thought they were turning up in houses because they like people and they want to cuddle. People had no clue about the actual lifestyle of koalas and where they naturally occurred. And yet everyone loved going to koala hospitals and having a hug. So we just really started following a local story about koalas getting hit on the roads in our local district in southwest Sydney. Turns out it's a critical colony to the survival of the New South Wales koala because it's a surviving population that was expanding and breeding and healthy and getting smashed on the road by a major development site, which was like a major corridor of development that's part of Sydney planning's kind of, extension of the city. So the issues around planning and the issues about the survival of koalas in the state at all were head to head in this local, advocate story, which was very hard to get any oxygen to. They weren't getting a lot of media. People are bored with activists. People don't want to see old people holding placards. Young people are busy. And it was a sort of desperate story, but it was still a story that was too small and too political for a broad audience. When we went further, the issue was different, and people said, oh, it's not development here, it's mining, and oh, it's not development here, it was the fires, oh, it's not development here, it's a disease. So we had to do a compilation of all the issues facing koalas and then stack them into a pile and understand the overarching issue is habitat loss and the pressure of climate change, and try and construct a thesis where you could understand how extinction happens.
What an interesting backstory, and yes, you've obviously put a lot of research and time, both you and Gregory, into making this film, and I'm quite intrigued as to the range of people that you were able to get to interview, and the way you were able to film koalas.
Yeah, is that a question?
Yes, how did you go about doing all that?
Well, to be honest, both that film and the previous film and a number of our films have been like shooting the research because we were not funded on a script. We researched and filmed from the very first day. So we had a lot of primary research, and we had a lot of research interviews, and some research interviews made it into the film and some didn't, and some characters didn't make the film. But we did a very good research job. I should probably get a second, postdoctoral degree or something. And we really got to know all the players in the koala research field. And, we were warned by people like producers like Anita Jacoby, who was a supporter of the film, said, "Don't make it all white coats." People reacted to the content all the way along the line, and we showed the film to people as we went. So that was one of our methods. Since Cultivating Murder, we show rough cuts, and we have fundraiser screenings based on showing the film while we're making it. And it's quite intense process, but it renders the content, and questions come up and people say, "But are you addressing this question? Are you answering this question?" And so then the thesis, shifts, and you realize, at the end, you want someone to say, "What is the problem? What is the solution? And what can we do?" And that's not there in the initial plan. You arrive at it in the edit.
And that's what I found so intriguing, because this film is pretty much a cri de coeur about saving koalas who are so endangered. And your film, your documentary, is a way of people engaging in that and finding ways to stop the habitat encroachment and so on. So I'm interested in the way you're using this film, perhaps in a very much a political way.
Yeah, well, it is a political strategy. Probably a lot of people are aware that there's a thing called impact producing. And since we stopped getting commissions from television to produce documentaries and one-offs, people have had to really hook onto audiences um, and stakeholder partners to galvanize films, focus the intent, and focus concepts like the call to action. So you get a lot of people who are, I guess, working in the activism space, speaking this language. It's kind of like marketing language, but it's impact producing language. What is your call to action? Your CTA. And you have to be quite clear that the film has a purpose. And I know I have seen really wonderful environmental films, like about the glossy black cockatoo, but at the end they say, "Write to the minister." Well, I'm not in WA and I don't know the minister, and I'm in the, so you have to think about this sort of multi-leveled call to action, which is the film will be shown in Queensland and Victoria. There'll be different calls and different critical local issues. So what we did was, by going out early with all the players in the film as partners or research partners, they're also the people who are going to activate the screenings in those areas. And we're currently lining up speakers in all those local areas to activate the film call to action with regard to Victorian legislation, with regard to the incidents that are in Victoria that are featured, for example, or the incidents in northern New South Wales, or no, we're in Queensland, we have different legislation. So it's quite a complex kind of weave, but it does mean activism or activation of different screenings with different Q&As and speakers, which doesn't have to be us in every instance,
Yes, film as agent of change, and getting people on board is so important to discuss the local issues and the other issues and ways of trying to surmount them. How easy was it to get production behind you to make the film, and did it take long to shoot?
Get production. Do you mean get money?
Yes.
We are the production. We do the production. We're it.
Yes. I mean
So Greg
money.
and I, yeah, we produced it. We shot it. Greg shot a lot of it, and I recorded
Yep.
sound. I shot some, but basically, it's like the means of production, distribution, exhibition. If you can own them, you can do it. So from the beginning, we did the filming without knowing. I think we had $2,000 from a local environment group in the Sutherland Shire of Sydney, and that was our catalyst. And we work quite closely with their policy researchers on the local issue, and we started filming local groups, and then we raised it to the regional issue. We got some money from regional environmental groups, and we were selected for the Documentary Australia Environmental Incubator accelerator program, which was to help us focus our strategy for fundraising from the NGO sector. So it was a lot of work, and it was constant work across the whole time frame up until even today, when I hope to send an invoice to Screen Australia for our final part of our budget, which was achieved through the producer equity program, the PEP. And that required a whole kind of stack of things be stacked up. We had to reach a threshold budget to be eligible. We had to attach a distributor to guarantee it would reach audience. And then we had to, be audited for the amount of funds we'd contributed ourselves and all the different partners. And that included, by that point, WIRES, who are a New South Wales-based wildlife rescue organisation. It included, at the 11th hour, WWF Australia, Worldwide Fund for Nature. So a lot of those people got on board when they saw the proof, the evidence, that what the film was. They waited to see the film, really, before they got on board, to know that it was doing the business that they're about. And now the film's finished, we've got all these environment groups just saying, well, you're the business, you're doing the business. So we've got the Bob Brown Foundation, the Australian Koala Foundation. A lot of them didn't give money, but they don't have a lot of money, and they're raising money too. Like, we're really, we're encroaching in their space by trying to compete for money from them.
So many hurdles to be able to get the film completed and financed and have it out there.
Indeed.
And it's always one of the key issues, of course, is getting a distributor, because you want the film to be seen in cinemas.
Indeed. Well, we're lucky we've got Dov from Screen Inc., who also is the publisher of Film Inc.
Yep.
And he's someone who, Greg and I both have exhibition distribution experience. We both worked for Melbourne Film Festival. He was a programmer and cinema manager for the Valhalla when I met him, the Chevelle in Sydney. I worked for Melbourne Film Festival with Tate Brady. I was a volunteer for years for Melbourne Film Festival. So it's sort of got and we program films. We've got a film club in New South Wales in a place called Hazelhurst, which is in Gymea. We've been running for 12 years a kind of Cinematech kind of program. So we've still got a finger in the pie of distribution, and we've got relationships with other independent producers, like Ronan and Gil Skine and so on. So we know the landscape, and we're capable of managing a release strategy, ourselves, with a partner who's, current in the field. So we're doing a kind of collaborative release with Dov, and we're putting together Q&As and special panels in each place, and then we're activating local organisations to promote it. So it'd be great to have an advertising budget, but the world's changed, social media. We've got a social media manager who's wonderful, who's sort of activating people via the social platforms and so on. But we rely on the partners to hook onto that and kind of share it on.
Oh, well done on all of that. Yeah, excellent news. Now, I'm quite intrigued. You would have shot so much material for the koalas. What was the editing process like? Because I can imagine that would have been quite difficult.
It was. We used a lot of hard drives, and we were always buying new hard drives of large amounts of memory. But um, we were lucky to have an established editor, Fiona Strain, ASC, on board on our first assembly edit, if you like. So we had an outside eye over the footage at the early stages of the edit. I think we went on to film for another year after that. But we were able to kind of editorialize or analyze what we had and what we didn't have in order to create a narrative structure. You know, we had over 100 days of filming across 3.5, 4 years. We had characters we had to go back to. So people we filmed in the beginning, we needed to kind of go back and keep following their stories. Like I said, this Southwest Sydney story really could have run the full length of the film, but ultimately we didn't want to move between multiple characters and multiple locations constantly because we didn't have the same level of story unfolding in all those layers. We didn't have them, they were localized. So in the end, we organized them by location and state and had a kind of map transition thing so people could understand what part of the country they were in and when they were in a different story. I don't really know what I can say except that, you know, it's a bit like coded by color and number. You know, you have character names, you have stories by location, but you also have thematics. So we kind of knew we were bookended by fire, you know, and flood. We cover, you know, fire and flood. It's sort of biblical, really. You know, we've got the existential crisis. We start with a fire that kills a third of New South Wales koalas, and then we film people who are still recovering from that fire, who are already in a sort of existential crisis. And then we try, towards the end of the film, we realize we need to show people hope and give people strategies for interventions and rolling their sleeves up and getting involved. And if we don't structure the film across the viewer's experience of it to equip them at the end to respond, then it's you know, it's a futile process. So the first cut was pretty devastating, and we had to go back to to put more cuddly koalas in, to be frank. So we've now got koala stories. I hope you like the koalas, but we're not wildlife filmmakers, and that footage was, you know, hard won. And, you know, we walk a line between that kind of film where people just want to see animals and feel good about them, and telling the stories of the scientists, the carers, the people who are really putting themselves on the front line of this crisis to try and make a difference.
Yes, I think you've got the balance there quite nicely put together. So well done on that. I was also interested that you've incorporated a First Nations connection into the film, and I think that's so important because we tend to ignore the importance that they place in everything related to habitat and
Absolutely.
environment. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, we were extremely lucky to meet the Gumbaynggirr elders of the Nambucca River Valley, who were very active at the time when we filmed them. They were involved in a struggle with New South Wales forestry, and they were really politicised. And these are very smart, very articulate, contemporary, you know, Aboriginal people. This is Uncle Miklo Jarrett and Sandy Greenwood. And they just really, they said, you know, you better get up here and tell our story. We need you now. And that was a very equal footing to meet them on, that they knew the story. The story was they're in their homelands, they're defending their homelands against forestry, and they're defending, you know, the plants and animals that they are custodians of. And these are people very strong in culture, But interestingly, we had done filming in that part of New South Wales when we first moved to New South Wales, and they were a more vulnerable community back 20 years ago. So they are increasingly reconnecting to culture and training people in language. Miklo is a language teacher of Gumbaynggirr language, and it may be one of the New South Wales languages which is returning to spoken use. And this is fantastic kind of movement. In other places, we went to try and talk to Indigenous people about koalas, and they were pretty much, until we get some land rights and some ability to look after our kids on country, don't ask us to be custodians of animals. We're still in the catastrophe of the colonial erasure, really. So, it wasn't without an effort to connect with Indigenous people and to get their story about what's happening to, native animals in this country. And as far as a lot of people, there's a lot of anger. A lot of Indigenous people are angry, are dispossessed. What can you say in the year following the failure of the Voice referendum? So if people are too close to feeding their family to get involved in environmental movement, I think, in truth, the environment movement and the land rights movement have been at odds in places and at times. And I don't think environmentalists are always been loved in their communities by everyone. And, some people have even said, don't say your film's an environmental documentary. So one of our big agendas was to have as many people holding hands and talking to one another about the issue, from scientists to local community members to regular everyday Aussies who just love a koala, to Indigenous people. Who could hate a koala? How could we not be on the same team, in this?
Yes, absolutely. Oh, look, well explained. That's excellent. So, Georgia, I know there is a website, www.thekoalasfilm.com, for people to get more information. The screenings that are coming up in Victoria, early June, and then the film releases June 18th nationally, I think.
That's right. Yeah. So I should say the screening on June the 16th at Castlemaine Documentary Festival is in fact, a universal premiere. It's never been screened, in public, in a ticketed auditorium, anywhere. So Castlemaine's getting the premiere, both nationally and internationally. And then we're going out in places like Ballarat, Geelong, Leongatha, but Sydney on the 20th of June at Dendy, Newtown, and then Cremorne, Orpheum, and then other cinemas to follow. But it's going out in Canberra, it's going out in Brisbane, there's screenings in Perth, I believe Launceston's on the cards. So the screenings are booking in right now, and we're really encouraging people to book via those independent cinemas so we can have more screenings. And like I said, we're offering Q&As with participants from the film, the filmmakers, koala experts, ecologists, forest ecologists who can talk about, the loss of habitat and the loss of forests. And I should say, what I haven't said is that koalas have only been chosen because they're emblematic and representative of animals that might live in an ecological niche in which other lesser known animals are also critically endangered. So it's not that we don't care about greater gliders and a whole lot of smaller mammals. Like, Australia has the highest rate of mammal extinction in the world, and people should really get to know their local native animals and who live in their patch. And that's one of the things that people can do that's quite empowering. We live in a Royal National Park south of Sydney. It's taken us a number of years to learn what animals are here, to get involved in protecting them, stopping dogs from killing them, cats from killing birds, becoming sensitive to the environment that we live in. And it's not too late for everyone to learn about their local patch. And hopefully the film, inspires that. And
Absolutely.
the koalas are the ambassadors in the
Yes,
battle.
they certainly are, and that's terrific that you're focused on them and you've explained that so well. And Georgia, are you planning another film at the moment?
I must say we've been pretty tied up in doing most of the roles ourselves, including now the distribution kind of campaign. We haven't got something else ready to announce to the world, but there's always other films. Greg and I are both working increasingly in areas like 360 and immersive work. We've done quite a bit of experiment. I did a 5-screen installation for galleries for my doctorate at Wollongong University in 2016. So that was called The Earth and the Elements, and it was about climate change and coal. So I've been teaching in VR at university, playing with 360 cameras. So we're quite interested in the whole expanded documentary and immersive space,
Mm.
but also in using those technologies with regard to these concepts about interconnectedness and climate and nature. So watch this space is all I can say. Or come and or talk to us about collaborations, because the time is now to break out of the silos and all work together on these urgent matters.
Absolutely. And certainly I urge people to go and see The Koalas. And we've been speaking to Georgia Wallace-Crabbe, who directed the film together with Gregory Miller. Georgia, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so
You
much.
too. Thanks so much. Look forward to it.
Okay. All the best. Bye bye.
Bye.